So, this is more of a thought that I put on source sheets because that's what I did. There is a famous machlokas when it comes to Chanukah between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. Who wants to tell me what it is? Anyone?
Lighting the candles.
Lighting the candle, exactly. Beis Shammai says the Gemara in Shabbos daf chaval v'beis. Yom Rishon madlik shmona, mikan ve'elech pochus v'holech. Beis Hillel omrim Yom Rishon madlik achas, mikan ve'elech mosif v'holech. Beis Shammai says you start with 8, you go down to 1, and Beis Hillel said you start with 1, you go up to 8, which Rabbi Glasser had a really nice idea about this past week. This is just a classic machlokas between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. Found throughout Shas, they're constantly arguing about different things. Interestingly enough, the actual people, Shammai and Hillel, do not argue very often. It's Beis Shammai, the school of Shammai, and Beis Hillel. The Gemara in Eruvin then says, source number 2, this all comes to a head, where they're arguing, and it says it can't be that we have these many arguments. We're gonna have 2 Torahs in Klal Yisrael. These people are gonna act like Shammai. These people are gonna act like Hillel. What are we going to do? So Omar, Rabbi Abba, Omar Shmuel, Shlosh Shon Nechel Beis Shammai. For 3 years they fought. Hello, Omar Halacha K'Mosano. These said Halacha is like us. Hello, Omar Halacha K'Mosano. These said Halacha is like us. Yotzes Abbas Kol, a heavenly voice emits from heaven, whatever that means. Omar Elu ve'Elu Divrei Elokim Chayim, and these and those are both the words of the living God. But we need to adjudicate one way, halacha k'beis Hillel. And this introduces this concept of elu ve'elu divrei elokim chayim. One is, by the way, Tosfos points out, we don't paskin ain't Torah lo b'shemaimi. So really, Beis Hillel there were just more Beis Hillel than there was Beis Shammai. It wasn't actually following this heavenly voice, whatever that exactly is. In different places you can find Tosfos describes it more like echo, a divine echo. But it wasn't. That's not really what it was. Beis Shammai was more halacha k'rabim. That's the way, the normal process of halacha, not going according to the way a voice from heaven. The interesting thing, however, is this idea of elu ve'elu. What does it mean to have elu ve'elu? These and those are the words of the living God. Either it's right or it's wrong. Either what I'm doing is, I'm drinking something that's kosher, or I'm drinking something that's not kosher. Either I'm lighting the menorah the right way, or I'm lighting it the wrong way. The idea of these dual truths is it doesn't really sit well with our philosophically. What does that mean?
Well, you can have 2 truths that are different. In physics of waves and pulses. The 2 things can be both true and not mutually exclusive.
Okay, so let's take that approach. We're going to take that approach again. This is a much longer discussion. There are many different answers. How can you have 2 different truths, right? Either so if you're right, either your mother tells you clean your room, or she says don't clean your room. How could you say both? All right, elu ve'elu doesn't make any sense. Especially we're talking about the Torah here. We're not talking about some random American law. We're talking about the Torah here. The God said this was God's command, or this was not God's command, right?
Well, here this is all the Rabbanim, so it's
called the Rabbanim and the Rising Tikna.
Yeah, but they made up the rules. They make up the rules however.
Called the Rabbanim and the Rising Tikna. They have to follow that. They have to follow that principle. So this is what the Maharal says, and I think it's fascinating. It's a little bit along the lines of what Elliot was saying, but really it's helpful because it gives us real insight into life, and it will also help us understand the Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. This is the Bir HaGol. It's found in Chagiga. Abir Harishon Omer Bal Asifus. He efshar, he says, this is source number 1 again. We started over. Elu ve'elu. Shiudas chachamim al derech achad. She'efshar, shiudas chachamim al derech achad. It's impossible that man can all think exactly the same way. It's impossible that there's not going to be deviance, there's not going to be variation in the terms of the way man thinks. It's just people are different. We have different things, different makeups. We think differently. Everyone is an individual, and everyone's going to think differently. There's no way to say we're all cookie cutter thinking the same exact way. That's Orwellian or Brave New World. Whatever you want to look at it. Utopia or dystopia, it's not possible. Ki kol davar v'davar iyasher shlo yihei b'chinu yosim achas l'davar echad. She'af im adavar tamei iyash lo yihei tzad b'chinu altar shalma. B'chinu adavar tar iyash lo yihei lo b'chinu ma shal tamei. He goes even deeper than that. That everything is complex. Everything, there's multiple sides and everything's multifaceted. that even in something that's tameh, it's impossible to say there's not going to be some bit of tahar in there. And even in something that's pure, there's going to be something that's tameh in there. Things are complex. Things are wider and broader than just simply saying yes, no, black or white. And because we are all different, because we're all different, we're all going to pick up on different nuances. There's different things that are going to speak to us. If you look in this famous poem, which is actually found in multiple different cultures, about the blind man and the elephant. Anyone familiar with this poem? The blind man and the elephant? There were 6 men in Dostin, to learn much inclined, who went to see an elephant, although they were all blind. That each by observation might satisfy his mind. The first approached the elephant and having to fall across his broad and sturdy side, and began to bawl, God bless me, but the elephant is like a wall. Right? Someone said, there's an elephant in town, so these 5 blind men are sitting around playing cards, whatever they're doing. Let's go check out this elephant. But they're blind. So the first guy feels the side, it's a wall. The second feels the tusk and says, wow, this is like a spear. The third man approaches it, and he feels the trunk, and he says, oh, no, it's actually a snake. And so, I cut up the rest of it, and so these men of Indostan disputed loud and long, each in his own opinion, exceedingly stiff and strong, though each was partly in the right, in all, or in the wrong. And I think that highlights what this Maharal is saying. In a way, we're all kind of the blind men. We all have our perspective, but we can't all see the full picture, because the full picture is too broad for any one person. So each of us is like, oh no, the elephant's like this. And the other one's like, no, the elephant's like that. Now how does that play to us, and how does they talk about Elu Elu? So I think one could say, Rav Zevin points this out, that the machlokas Beis Shammai Beis Hillel wasn't some arbitrary machlokas. Beis Shammai woke up one day and was like, I think that you have to write 8 going down. Beis Hillel says, I think no, you have to write 1 to 8. And the reason for that is, Beis Shammai started, we get less excited as we go on. Beis Hillel says we get more excited. But actually, it's a much deeper machlokas. Rav Zevin, who was the author of Encyclopedia Talmudit, the beginning of it, originator of the project, he says it actually gets to a much deeper idea about how these 2 individuals approached life. That they each of them, as the Maharal pointed out, have their own psychological makeup, their own way of approaching the world, and therefore they approach life differently. Beis Shammai said, I look at this menorah each day, the miracle is a little less. On day 1, there's a miracle because there's a potential here for 8 days of miracle. Where on day 4, there's only 4 more days of miracle left. That I'm looking at the potential. I'm looking at the potential, and therefore, whenever that potential may be, I'm going to celebrate it, corresponding to that. Each day of Hanukkah is a little less potential. Coming up is Tu B'Shvat. When is Beis Shammai's Tu B'Shvat? It's earlier, just when the sap begins to go into the tree. When underground, the tree begins to reawake. Beis Hillel argues. He says basically that's the potential for the tree to rejuvenate. Beis Hillel argues, says, I don't look at the potential, I look at the here and now. On day 1, a little miracle, whatever, Beis Yosef's question. On day 8, the biggest miracle, the here and now, look, it's been burning for 8 days. Tu B'Shvat, when is the tree actually starting to rejuvenate? When the sap enters the branches. That what they're arguing about is not just a mere machlokas, so right versus wrong, but rather an approach to the world. Beis Shammai is saying, look at the potential, and Beis Hillel is saying, the here and now. The here and now. And I think why this is helpful, because so often, especially in the world we live in, everything has become very black and white. Either you're right or you're wrong. Either you vote this way or you vote that way. Either you think about things this way or that way. And what Beis Shammai is reminding us is life is complex. And sometimes it's not about a right or wrong, but rather about different underlying values and where do you place primacy? And how do you weigh those values? And where do you place emphasis on them? And therefore we can both believe the same thing, but I believe a certain value perhaps deserves more emphasis, and you believe one deserves less emphasis. And therefore it can lead to different conclusions. Rav Asaf Ben Narsh pointed out, therefore, this is again source number 1. This is not because Beis Hillel had an agenda of leniency and Beis Shammai one of stringency. Rather, as the Maharal pointed out, God created people to think differently and endowed each of us with his own personality, perspective, and way of thinking. Beis Hillel were spiritually optimists who naturally saw the good in everything and appreciated the aspect of permissibility in various halachic questionable matters. Beis Shammai, on the other hand, were natural pessimists, who saw the authentic aspect of spiritual danger in various halachic matters. Any person or school can, by definition, only see part of the truth, and God created each of us to be able to recognize a different aspect of the ultimate truth. It is therefore no wonder that throughout Jewish history, we find that halachic decisors rule in accordance with their particular perspectives. This is not evidence of a political agenda corrupting the pristine halachic truth, but rather the proper workings of the halachic process. Everyone sees his aspect of the truth from his own perspective, and then, by combining all those aspects, the later generations can achieve a holistic perspective that approaches the complete divine truth. And I think, again, just something to walk away from, and maybe it's a lesson of Chanukah, but it's really a lesson of life, is to recognize that life is complex, and we all have our own perspective, and just because we believe someone with firm conviction, and we should have conviction, doesn't necessarily mean the other person is wrong. It could just mean they emphasize certain values or processes differently than we do.